Mondo Cool. That's right, boys. Mondo Cool.
Hi everyone, this is Shintai, and today I have with me my good friend, Andrew. What's up, man?
What's up?
We're going to be doing a review of The Walking Dead. This is a very interesting game because it's not based specifically on the show, even though there are some connections, but both are based on the comic, but not directly, in that it's not a direct adaptation.
There is like two characters from the show that appear, and there was one character from the comic, Lily, although the problem is it has a lot of continuity errors, which I'm hoping that someday they'll get fixed up and they actually bring this game into part of their continuity, since it is really, really popular and really good.
But yeah, The Walking Dead is basically a point-and-click adventure type of game, very similar to the Back to the Future game that TellTale Games released not that long ago. Before we get into talking about the game itself, Andrew and I should explain our stance on zombies in general. Now, me personally, I'm extremely apathetic towards zombies. I'm not a big fan of them, but I don't go out of my way to not watch something that has zombies in it. I don't feel too strongly about them one way or the other, but I know Andrew's a bit different.
I never really liked zombies. I mean, I was part of the craze when it first came up, but then later I just ended up not being interested, because I'm the kind of person who believes in robot apocalypse better than zombie apocalypse. The only kind of zombies I like is from like Skyrim, where they're just undead warriors, or like World of Warcraft with the Wrath of Lich King and the Scourge. I do also love slow zombies, but the strange thing is, I'm never into games like Left 4 Dead or anything like that, where it's just shoot a bunch of zombies and survive as long as you can. When I heard about the Walking Dead game, I heard it was much more about the survival. To me, it's far more interesting in that than it is in just shooting stuff.
Let's get into talking about the actual game. Personally, I really like how this game looks. It's got personality to it. It's got a lot of colors. Technically speaking, it's not the best. Despite that, it's got a really great art direction. And despite the fact that it is kind of colorful, it does a good job of still being somewhat scary, which I think is kind of hard to pull off.
Pretty much based on the comic book style, which I just do love the art design entirely, because you could still have a colorful and beautiful setting and great character designs, which they all look distinctly different, and you could be able to tell which is which. Like, it still look kind of cartoony, but still have enough realistic gore that it still looks believable. Like, it's still, like, when it gets gory, it still looks painful.
I also felt that the voice work in this game was great. I really liked the performances in this game. I thought the voices that they picked were just on the dot.
I do like Lee's voice, due to the fact that he has a deep voice, but he's really, really calming. He could switch to being like calm, understanding guy to like a very, very quick to anger, and you can actually tell that. Another voice that I really like is Kenny. Also one of my favorite characters. There are some other really cool characters that have really good voices.
I thought the voice work was great and worked great with the characters. Now the music, however, I thought was pretty forgettable. I can't really remember any tracks. That's mostly because the music was just kind of there to just enhance the scenes rather than to be good songs on their own. They work well for what they do, but if there's a soundtrack out there, I would not recommend to go out and get it. It's not anything special.
The only one track I did like was the very last one with the ending, but sadly I don't know the name, but it's like the only good track I remember.
So usually I would tackle gameplay last, but in this game it's different, so we're going to talk about it now. The gameplay in this game, like I mentioned before, is like a point-and-click adventure type of game, similar to like Back to the Future. The gameplay is pretty solid. It controls well, it plays well, but my biggest problem is that point-and-click adventure games are supposed to be about puzzles as well and trying to figure things out. The puzzles in this game are barely even puzzles. Like, was only ever stuck on one puzzle throughout the entire game, and it really wasn't a puzzle, and it wasn't because it was difficult to figure out. It was because I missed something, and I had to go back and pick it up, and that's all it was. that was kind of disappointing. I would have liked to have seen some more interesting brain teasers here. I would have liked to have seen something that would have actually made me think, what am I supposed to do? How do I figure this out? There was none of that in this game, and that is kind of a letdown. Point-and-click adventure games, that's one of the things that they're known for, is having some, like, sometimes really absurd, but, sometimes really good puzzles.
To me, with the gameplay, I played Back to the Future, and I love that game. I like the story of that one, but the problem about that game is the adventure game aspect kind of overshadowed the story and really slowed down the game. The one thing I like about this, and I played a lot of other adventure games, like I played on Monkey Island and I played Phantasmagoria too, don't ask. But the puzzles in this one I actually do like because they're actually something you would think about. Like, I need to open this door, but I need to remove the handle of this door. And, you have a multi-tool. Simple, basic, you have a tool and helps a simple situation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the puzzles make sense. And that is something I do like about the puzzles, and that is a problem with puzzles in a lot of point-and-click adventure games, is that they don't make sense, but it's to the point where they're really dead simple. They don't require any effort at all to figure out.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, but that's what I do kind of like about it.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, this isn't really something that you play for the gameplay. This is not a fun game to play. This is mostly about the story and the characters. The gameplay just kind of exists to move the story forward.
But also there's the QuickTime events, which
aren't that bad.
Yeah, I really enjoyed them. The first few fights are actually really, really fun. My only problem is there's some fights where they require you to move, and it sometimes is jarring because you never really know that until the prompt tells you to, and you're like, oh, right, well, some moments where you don't move at all and you just click, which that's my only time the combat really annoys me.
The one thing I really liked about the combat, though, for example, Heavy Rain, I really hated the combat in that game because the fighting just looks so ridiculous and just dumb.
Well, the later fights, yeah.
The thing I liked about the fights in The Walking Dead were it felt realistic. It didn't feel forced or over the top or ridiculous or anything like that. They felt grounded in reality, and they weren't over the top. So basically, this game is about the main character, Lee, who is at the start of the game on his way to jail. While he's being driven, him and the police officer just ram into a zombie. And that kind of rolls into the rest of the events of the game, where he finds this little girl named Clementine, and then they meet up with Kenny, and then they just start meeting all these different characters throughout the rest of the game. The thing I like about this game is that it has a really good pace. Everything has a very logical flow to it.
One of the things I like about this is I did like the choices. Like, some of the choices I do like, whether you agree with this person or the other person. I really like how they're done, and even though if you don't agree with some of the choices, at least their acting and their reasoning, like, when they get mad at you for something, it makes sense.
The story in and of itself is pretty interesting because it's a zombie attack, but instead of focusing on the zombies themselves, it's about the characters. And that is what makes this really good, because it's very character-driven. You can't have something character-driven without the characters being good, because then it completely falls apart. But luckily, they're all really interesting. Some of them you're really going to like, and some of them you're really not going to like. I think that makes them really well done characters. You actually feel something for these characters. Maybe a character will die that you don't like, and even though you didn't like them, you may still feel bad that that character went out the way they did. And I think that is a mark of good storytelling.
I do love the characters. Like, even some of the smaller characters, even some of the characters that I remember each one of them. Like what you said, if a character you didn't like die, it can still feel impact. But, sometimes it could be like, there'll be a character you don't like and they'll save your life, which can happen. Really like that. And one of my favorite characters so far is pretty much Kenny. I really like his determination, his love for his family, and my character is pretty much kind of agrees with him, and some of the funnest moments is pretty much with him. But then there'll be characters like Lily, who, you have a problem with, but I kind of grown to like her. And then there'll be like some other characters like Ben, who's just a kid. He tries his best, and, you can kind of acknowledge him for it.
This game does a really good job of also getting you to care about these characters. I think in particular, Clementine, who is this little girl that Lee picks up at the beginning of the game, and she's with you for the rest of the game. And the game does a really good job of getting you to really care about her and wanting to protect her. She's just a very sweet, innocent girl who's in this just insane situation, having to just learn how to adapt. It's kind of rough seeing her go through some of the things that she does.
A little small thing for me is, yeah, this game has kids in it, but they're not overly pushed and they're not overly annoying as kids can get, which I do actually like.
I think the survival aspect of this game, in terms of the story, is really well done as well, because there are times where the characters will talk about, like, man, we're running low on food. And there was actually an event in the game where it forced you to hand out food rations to people, and you didn't have enough to feed everyone. You had to, like, make a decision, like, okay, do I give food to this person, that person? It really kind of just hammers in like, wow, look at this kind of situation that these people are in. What if we were in this situation? Would we make these same choices? It's interesting. But that also brings me to one of the things I don't like. I know Andrew said that he did like the choices, but I'm very mixed on the choices. You do make certain dialogue choices in the game, or you make certain choices that alter certain events in the game. But in the end, the choices that you make in this game are pretty much pointless. They don't really matter. Now, the point of these choices, though, is more to analyze what kind of a person you are and what your morals are. And if you look at the choices in this perspective, they're actually very interesting. There are some interesting choices that you can make in the game. There will even be points where you're like, oh my god, I can't believe the game is making me make this kind of decision. That's pretty brutal. And then that way, the choices are very effective. But if we're talking about in terms of the actual plot, the choices are irrelevant. And that's something I really didn't care for. But otherwise, the choices are interesting. They could have been done better, but depending on how you look at them, they are kind of cool.
Yeah, the kind of disappointing thing is the fact that a lot of choices don't really mean much. But one of the things I do like is when he chose the dialogue, they'll remember stuff and they'll like talk about it later on. I remember one moment in episode 2 where they said, do you guys have a leader? And he's like, no, we're not all, grouped together. And I remember later on, he's like, so what do you do? He's like, well, I help lead these people. He said something like that. And they go, wait, didn't you say that you aren't a leader? It's like, well, I help with the survival. I thought you were asking for like survival. I'm pretty much helping them with the survival part, but I'm not a leader to them. And that little stuff I really, really like.
Yeah, because characters will remember what you said. That is kind of interesting. In the beginning of the game, Kenny's kid is being accused of being bitten. So the other people in the immediate situation want Duck out of that place because they don't want another zombie on their hands. And I had Lee defend Kenny's kid. And later on, Kenny remembered that you defended his kid, and he'll say like, hey, thanks for defending my kid. That was really cool of you to do. You had my back. And it is interesting how characters do remember those things. And it does add a little something to the game, I feel.
This game has 5 episodes. Episode 1 is the most simple. Like, it had a really good start of everything, but the problem is that the choices there are very, very simple. There's being good and there's being an a-hole, like one of them, when they accused Duck of being a zombie. It had a really good start. Episode 1, bad choices, but good start. But episode 2, I really liked, and that's when it really started picking up, putting in more intense choices.
Some of the events in episode 2 are probably some of the most memorable.
I love episode 2. Episode 3 is, I would say, that's when it starts to roll downhill with the events. I won't say anything, but just be ready for episode 3. Episode 4, I think, is the most traveling. Like, you're always going to different locations and always exploring the most stuff.
Me personally, I felt that episode 5 felt like the most destructive, because it felt like in episode 5, like, that's where everything started falling apart.
Episode 5, though, I thought had a really cool ending. The ending was really well done, and it really brings out emotion, and it also is really sad.
I felt that the ending, though, was a little predictable, but regardless of the fact that I predicted what was going to happen, and I was right, it was still done really well, and I was still connected to the characters, and I could still feel for them.
A lot of people really enjoy this. They say that they're definitely going to make sequels to it, and I can't wait for season 2, and I hope that they actually connect it with continuity.
Alright folks, time to start winding down. In the end, I think both Andrew and I pretty much agree that The Walking Dead is an excellent game. Visually interesting. The voice work is really well done. And while the puzzles aren't really anything special, the story is what brings you in, and you'll feel a connection with the characters, and you really feel for them. I have to say, if you're in the mood to play a game that is fun to play, I wouldn't recommend this, but if you really want something that's very engaging in its story and its characters, and you want to feel something for these characters, then The Walking Dead is definitely for you. Keep in mind some of the faults that we mentioned, and you will definitely enjoy this game.
If you're into a zombie game, but if you keep in mind that it's more survival than it is action, you would still pretty much enjoy this. I think super zombie fans who just always wanted a zombie apocalypse, I think they would like this game. But I enjoy this game. I can't wait for more, and I can't wait for more of the continuation of the story. And it's strange the fact that, again, I don't really like zombies.
All right, thank you for joining me on this review, Andrew. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
See you guys soon. This has been Shintai and Andrew. Take care, everyone.
See ya.